What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Sloppy Saturdays. And today we are going over the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Why I believe Dylan Raiola has tremendous opportunity to come in and lead this team possibly to a college football playoff berth. When you look at their schedule last year, it was probably one of the most competitive schedules in college football. Outside of one game, every loss they had was a single score loss, which we're going to go over. I really like the core of this team when you talk about Matt Rule as a very good coach and Dylan Raiola with high expectations. Now, if you guys have listened to this podcast, you know me and my gripe with Dylan Raiola. I am not a Dylan Raiola fan just by the way he carries himself. We all know his comparison to Patrick Mahomes. I don't mind a guy modeling your game after a certain player, a guy idolizing a certain player, but I feel like Dylan Raiola tries to be Patrick Mahomes. That's my gripe to him. But again, I believe this guy is super talented. I believe this guy could be a very good quarterback to a great quarterback one day in college football. And I believe with how this team competed last year and how underwhelming his season was, this year lays a huge opportunity for them, like I said, because I also believe their schedule is very, very good for them. I believe their schedule just has a ton of opportunity when it comes to matchups. And I just want to get into it all. When we look at last year, this team went 7-6. And when you look at Dylan Mariola's stat line, 2,800 yards, 13 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, horrible touchdown to QB, horrible touchdown to interception ratio. But not only that, I believe there were handcuffs on Dylan Mariola as well. He had a 67.1 completion percentage, but I felt like he wasn't taking enough chances at all. When we look at Dylan Raiola, a skill set very similar to like Patrick Mahomes, Caleb Williams, a guy that can make all these off-angle throws, but also a guy that likes to move around in the pocket with his eyes up looking for the best play. I believe there was just a lot of short yardage throws for him and just not enough chances, which I think this year in an improved offense, there's going to be a lot more chances. So Dylan Raiola, like I said, this guy is just going to naturally improve coming off of last year. Like we know that talent does not match the production for Dylan Raiola with all the things he could do on a football field. And I think that's mainly because, again, you started Dylan Raiola as a true freshman, which I highly, highly am against. But when you look at Nebraska and Matt Rule, they really had no choice. Dylan Raiola was the most talented player in the room, and you got to do what's best for that program. So they really had no choice to start him. And Dylan Raiola committed to Nebraska. I mean, he kind of expected that to start his first year. He wasn't committed to a program like Alabama or Georgia where he has the opportunity to sit. And it's going to be very similar to Bryce Underwood this year. Like, I think Bryce Underwood's going to have a better year, no doubt. But again, a similar situation where he has to start because he's the most talented player in that room. That's what happened to Dylan Raiola last year. And again, I think things are just going to get better for him naturally, even if it's not to the ceiling that we think it could be this year. Things are going to get better just from the trial and tribulations of playing all these games as a true freshman. So let's get right into their schedule last year. When you look at their schedule last year, they came in hot, absolutely destroying UTEP in their first game, 40-7. Absolutely blew the brakes off them. They beat Colorado as well, 28-10. This defense absolutely shut down Colorado. Then they played Northern Iowa, beat them 34-3. So again, we had very high expectations coming into the year for this team when you had 3 blowout wins to start the schedule, especially one against a Big Ten opponent who wasn't bad last year. Then they lose to Illinois in overtime. Illinois was a good team, better team than we thought they were going to be last year. They lose them in overtime. Then they beat Purdue 28-10. They beat Rutgers 14-7. Against Indiana, this is the one game they got the brakes blown off of them. They lose 56-7. I remember that game vividly because I had Indiana. Then they play Ohio State. They actually were very competitive at Ohio State. I remember that game vividly because I was at that game at Ohio State. They lose 21-17, which again, that is just crazy that they were able to stay in that game with the talent that they had compared to Ohio State. They lose to UCLA 27-20. That's a game they shouldn't have lost. UCLA was absolutely awful last year. That's a game they should have won. They lose to USC 28-20. Again, another one-score game. They beat Wisconsin 44-25. Wisconsin towards the end of the year, they kind of just fell off. And then they lose to Iowa 13-10. Another game they shouldn't have lost. Dylan Raiola, again, he has to be able to put up 20-plus points. And then they beat Boston College 20-15 as well in the Pinstripe Bowl. So Now you're getting into the offense and this team this year. I think this team is much improved. I really like what they were able to do in the transfer portal. When you highlight their transfer portal pickups, they bring in experience, which I absolutely love. You bring in Dane Key out of Kentucky. He had significant production, over 700 yards in the SEC. As a senior, you bring in experience to this receiving corps. You also bring in Isaiah Hunter, who I think could have an even better year than last year on a Cal team. That's offense wasn't bad with Fernando Mendoza. He puts up 500 plus yards. So I really like those transfer moves. You keep Ja'Cory Barney Jr., who again I think is a deep threat, something that adds a little difference to this offense. A guy that you're able to use in the run game as well. I like that, and I think for this offense to really get the most out of them, they got to get stuff out of Cortez Mills, a guy in high school that had over 1,600 yards, 18 touchdowns in his senior season, a four-star recruit. He's not a redshirt at all, so they're expected to use him. And I think if they can make him into just a solid Big Ten receiver, again, you don't got to be one of the best receivers in the Big Ten, but if you're able to develop him into another solid receiver to have a solid four-man receiving group, I think that would be huge. The biggest thing for this Nebraska team that I absolutely love is this offensive line. When you look, them getting Rocco Spindler out of the transfer portal, out of Notre Dame, one of the best offensive lines in the country. And they also had Elijah Pritchett as well, a very good offensive lineman coming from Alabama. It is so big that they make this offensive line an above average unit. Because, like we said, having this play style, like a Caleb Williams, like a Patrick Mahomes, like an Aaron Rodgers, where you like to sit in the pocket with your eyes up for a while, you got to have an offensive line that really allows you to play at that play style. If you have a below average offensive line with a guy that's constantly trying to extend plays, it's going to be a disaster. But with them shoring up this offensive line, I truly love it. The only thing I don't like about this Nebraska offense is their running backs. But if this offensive line is really good, maybe they get the most out of these running backs. But I don't think they have a lot of depth at the running back position at all. You have Emmett Johnson, who was on his team last year, had over 500 yards, had 5 yards per carry. Like, he doesn't have that much significant production coming in as a lead back. Then you have nobody else on this entire running back group that has really any production. You have Quentin Eves with 7 yards last year. You have Mekhi Nelson and Jamarian Parker as true freshmen. Again, maybe they could come in and produce, but I don't know. You just don't have enough depth, enough college football experience at the running back position. Again, we really like this offensive line, so maybe they get the most out of this room, but it's going to be tough. The defense I do really like because the defense last year was not bad at all. I think it was an above average unit. Was it a great unit? No. But this was a unit that let up about 19.5 points per game last year, which again, if you stay at that number or even improve a little bit, like that's going to be enough to win and take a huge jump in the Big Ten with the expected jump from this offense, because 19.5 points per game, your offense should be scoring 20 plus a game in most games. They return a lot of players on this offense. When you look at it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 guys are going to be starters from last year. Then they also had a couple of transfer guys that I do really like. When you look at Marcus Watson Trent, he had 52 solo tackles last year coming from Georgia Southern. I think this guy's going to be an immediately plug-and-play starter. Again, not coming from a huge program, but a guy that's going to be a starter for you right away, day one. Then you look at Dazen Makule. He's going to be one of those guys that are going to be a high upside guy. It's going to be interesting to see how he comes in as a starter. Coming from Oklahoma, coming from Indiana. This is a guy with so much raw talent. It's going to be interesting to see how Matt Rule and his staff really gets the most out of him, because he's a guy that's not a plug-and-play starter, but a guy that's going to be started for him this year. And we're going to see if he's able to, again, be able to reach his talent. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this Nebraska team pans out with this schedule. Let's get into the 2025 schedule, and I'm going to tell you guys why I believe this team has so much opportunity. Like I said, it's really going to all come down to Dylan Raiola taking this next step, again, which I think he will, with a 13 touchdown, 11 interception ratio. He's just naturally going to get better. And when you look at the schedule, so much opportunity. We get into the first game against Cincinnati. I believe Nebraska is the better team. That game's actually going to be in Arrowhead Stadium. Again, I don't know if they're doing it because of Dylan Raiola. What is the move there? But again, that game's at a neutral site. I do expect Nebraska to win that game. Then they play Akron and Houston Christian. If they were able to beat Cincinnati going into Akron and Houston Christian, those are going to be two very easy wins. They play Michigan, which is one of the harder games on their schedule. But again, I think that's a game on even playing field. I think it is an even matchup. And then it's also at Nebraska being one of their toughest games. So I do like that. And you're coming in playing Bryce Underwood early. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Bryce Underwood adapts to college football. And again, if he's not where he's supposed to be right away, I think that's a game Nebraska could definitely win. They versus Michigan State. I expect them to win that game. They're at Maryland. I expect them to win that game. Then they play at Minnesota, which I think, again, is a very tough game. It's at Minnesota. I think Minnesota is going to be solid this year. But again, a game they definitely could win. They play Northwestern. I think they're definitely going to win that game at home. They play USC at home. That's going to be a very tough game. Like we said, they lost to USC last year, but they're at home for that game, which I do really like. They're at UCLA. I expect them to beat UCLA this year for sure. Then they play at Penn State. They're going to lose that game like they just are. Penn State, in my opinion, is the best team in the country. Then they play Iowa at home, which is going to be one of their tougher games as well. But when we look at this game, when we look at the schedule, they play Penn State, which is the only game where I really mark them as a loss in their schedule definitively. And then when you look at Michigan, Minnesota, USC, UCLA, Penn State, like we said, and Iowa, those are 6 games that are tough games. If they even go 3-3 in those games and they win the rest of their games, you're looking at a team that could very well sneak into the college football playoffs. This is a team, if everything pans out, you could see possibly 2 losses. Like, this schedule is not that hard for them. They are favored or on a short line in basically every game in the schedule outside of Penn State. I absolutely love this schedule and the opportunity for them. When, like I said, when you look at a team last year that was 7-6, that lost 5 one-score games, and you expect Dylan Raiola, like I said, last year as a true freshman, not having the best year. Like I said, his talent did not match the production, but after a true freshman season with an improved offense, this year this Nebraska team should only get better, and they could possibly make a college football playoff run. That wraps up this episode of Sloppy Saturdays, and we are